Hi everyone, my name is Gabby Christensen and I've been working in the Remind Lab under the guidance of Professor Sarah Raskin, along with my lab mate Jocelyn Moran. And we've been investigating the resources available to immigrant survivors of domestic violence. For a brief introduction to our study, it was done in collaboration with Interval House, which is an agency here in Hartford working against domestic violence. Our main goal of this study was to specifically improve support for immigrant survivors of domestic violence. So Interval House has a project entitled Hope Beyond Fear, in which they're hoping to determine what outcomes occur after they provide resources to these immigrant survivors of domestic violence. So within our study, Interval House helped us to recruit 19 immigrant survivors of domestic violence, and 15 of them were able to fully complete the study. The original intention was to complete both a pre- and post-interview, both before and after providing resources to these women. However, it ended up being condensed into just one interview due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We were able to complete the interview in either English or Spanish, depending on what the participant preferred, and 7 of these interviews were done in person prior to the pandemic, while 8 had to be completed via telephone. In addition to this interview, the staff at Interval House also kept a log of their interactions with these survivors, any interactions that involved explaining certain resources to them. And in our interview, there were 3 different categories for questions, and they related to feelings of safety in the home, feelings of safety in the community, and a sense of control over their current living situation. So for an example of feelings of safety in the home, we have, I am able to sleep at night. An example of feelings of safety in the community is, I have knowledge about community resources. And finally, for a sense of control over current living situation, it is, I have a safety plan in place. So after all these questions were asked of these women, we then totaled up the yes and no responses to each question, along with whether that specific topic was explained by an Interval House staff member during an interaction with a survivor. We then completed a chi-square analysis of these responses and were able to determine which topics were specifically most known to these immigrant survivors and which were least known to them. So beginning with the category of feelings of safety in the home, most of these women did know of a safe place to go. They were able to communicate well with their landlord, and they understood the concept of a temporary restraining order. However, very few of them knew what to do specifically if ICE came to their house. In regards to the general category of feelings of safety in the community, most of the women knew what to do if an abuser approached them outside of their house, and most knew how to contact a translator. However, very few of them knew of the conditions under which they could or could not be deported. And for the category of sense of control over current living situation, most of the women did have a safety plan in place. They knew what to do if they were threatened by their abuser, and they knew how to access a variety of medical, legal, and social resources. However, very few of them knew what to do if their abuser happened to call ICE or the police. They didn't know their rights under the Violence Against Women Act, and they did not know their rights as victim of a crime. So in conclusion, for the most part, these survivors are receiving the intended information that the Interval House staff members want them to receive. And for the most part, it is imminent info, such as a safety plan, essential resources, and a safe place that are most known to these immigrant survivors. And that could be explained by the staff members explaining those specific categories very well. However, for information related to ICE and deportation, this was not very well known to these immigrant survivors. And that could either be due to the fact that it's not very habitual for the staff members, as it's very specifically related to undocumented individuals, or it could be that these women are not disclosing that they're undocumented, so the staff members don't review the information with them. So we determined that it is important to review all of this information with all of the survivors so that they do not have to specifically disclose that they're undocumented. In regards to future directions, we have started a new study that is investigating the role of culture and intimate partner violence. So previous research done with Professor Raskin has showed that culture does play a role in memory. And additionally, intimate partner violence has been tied to traumatic brain injury. So we want to look at the interaction between these three items, the role of culture, intimate partner violence, and brain injury, to see if there's any correlation between specific cultures and specific forms of intimate partner violence and forms of brain injury. So we're specifically looking at survivors from the US, Puerto Rico, and Central America. So in conclusion, I would just like to thank Professor Raskin for all of her hard work, support, and guidance of us, Jocelyn Moran for all of her hard work in interviewing these participants, and finally, especially Interval House for all of their assistance in recruiting participants for us and their ongoing support of survivors of domestic violence. Thank you.